All right, my friends, welcome to another bonus episode here of the Red Delta Project podcast. We're taking a simplified, fundamental approach to diet and exercise. I got a special guest on today. This is Alayna Burke. She is an undergrad who is studying in nutrition and dietitian. And she also is the co-author of the book, Full: Overcoming Eating Disorders to Fully Live. And that really speaks to me because when I was Alayna's age back in college, I thought I was doing everything right when it came to eating right and everything, but it was basically just a way to disguise a lot of disordered eating patterns that I had. And looking back, that's exactly what that sort of thing did for me, was just kind of suppressed my quality of life and held me back in fully enjoying not only food, but in my health, fitness, and my lifestyle. So I got Alayna on here. She's a lot more well-versed in the latest and greatest research that's going on about eating disorders. So I'm going to shut up now and hand it over. Alayna, welcome to the Red Delta Project.
Hi, thank you. It's really cool to be here on sort of a fitness platform because I think that's a space where there's a lot of misinformation, and definitely a place where I went down the wrong path in my eating disorder. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I think that's where a lot of, at least for me and a lot of my friends who've had these sorts of issues, it's kind of starts off with all the good intentions. Like, okay, I'm going to start eating less junk food. I'm going to drink more water and stuff. But at some point, the logic train jumps the rails and
Mhm.
it's no longer healthy. It's no longer a good thing to be doing, even though it's under the cloak of health and wellness and I'm doing this for myself. But if we ever really look back on it, it's like, yeah, it's not really all that healthy if we're honest with ourselves. What are some of the signs that we can look for that kind of clue us into the idea of, yeah, it's no longer so healthy for mind, body, and lifestyle anymore?
Yeah, totally. I definitely had an obsession with cooking, which was an interesting sign that my parents noticed. I also became vegan, um, and I told people that it was for the environment and my health, when it was really just a way for me to cut out food groups and eat less. So big signs going on diets for sure. Diets can be healthy, I think, for some people, but it's a very touchy thing. For me personally, I can't go on a diet. It's just, it will not resonate with my mind correctly, and I will take it too far. And I know that now. Getting obsessive with diets, getting obsessive with cooking. I would cook things but not eat them, which is a really interesting thing. The way the mind works, I was so badly craving food that I wanted to be around it, but I wouldn't let myself consume it. Um, Another thing is wearing baggy clothing, to kind of hide the body, and make sure that people aren't noticing maybe how the body is changing, or just being insecure, so wanting to wear baggy clothing. Um, yeah, and it looks different for everybody, but those were three big signs that my family noticed.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about disordered eating patterns is that when people start to see what you're doing and recognizing the extremes that you're taking things, and that they're clued into your stress levels, they're clued into how it's affecting you emotionally and physically and stuff. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that comes about that is that you're doing it to fit some sort of societal norm, that you're doing it for other people. Like, I've got to look good for other people. I want to be attractive for whoever I want as a romantic partner and stuff. And if anything, eating disorders oftentimes cause you to hide away from the world a lot more. Like
Mhm.
you said, with the baggy clothes. When I was going through my disordered patterns, I didn't want to be around my friends as much. I didn't want to
Mhm.
be at cocktail parties. And it's really very much a cyclical thing that we're doing so much for ourselves. It's like, the angel and the devil on the shoulder, and you're conversing back and forth, and your mind is very little attention, at least in my case. I didn't care at all what people were thinking. In fact, I wanted people to think of me less. and less. I like, don't pay attention to my body. Don't pay attention to what I'm eating. Like, let's go out to this restaurant. I don't want to go out and eat with you guys because you're going to see that I'm just going to have a plate of salad greens and
Mhm.
5 almonds, and that's going to be my dinner. It's like, I don't want to do this and be a parent to other people. Was that something you find yourself too?
Absolutely. And that's pretty much the entire our book addresses that exactly. We have 12 different chapters, and those chapters are called the underlying issues. It's never really about the food, and it's never really about the appearance. So we go through these 12 different topics. And you were saying wanting to hide, we talk about shame a lot. It was such a shameful thing for me, and I didn't want anybody to see. Um, but we talk about ways to overcome shame and speak to your shame, bring it into the light. And so yeah, you hit it right on the nose.
It's interesting because I didn't really feel, maybe I did, but I just wasn't acknowledging it. But can you dive a little bit more into the shame of what? The shame of your behaviors, your body? Can you explore that a little bit more? I'm curious.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's different for everybody. My shame was centered around um, depression and anxiety. So I had depression and anxiety before I developed an eating disorder. And the way my anxiety and depression manifested was by obsessing with food and exercise. I was so ashamed that I was struggling with depression and anxiety that I was trying to find ways to control my life.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, shame is different for everyone.
Yeah, it totally makes sense because when I studied eating disorders back in college myself, one of the biggest lessons that just kept getting hammered in every class and every professor I took that I learned from was fundamentally a disorder like this is coming from needing a sense of control.
Mhm.
And it's very much prevalent in times or places in our lives where we feel like we're losing control. Adolescence and when we're younger, that's a classic example. Like for me, I was in college, my world was topsy turvy. I don't know where I'm going in 4 years. It's all over. So there's at least something I can control, a lot of anxiety around things. Other people is triggered with big family changes, parents
Mhm.
getting divorced or having a divorce yourself or moving to another state or things like this. Your world kind of feels like up in the air. So again, it boils down to a sense of control and
Mhm.
the need for control. And one of the takeaways that I took, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, is how I finally was able to kind of break out of it was recognizing that these habits and behaviors I had actually left me with less control than if I didn't have them. It's like, okay, if I could just control my diet, then I'll have full control. And understanding how fitness really works is like, no, you don't. You don't have full control with just not eating certain foods and things like that. What are your thoughts
Mhm.
on that sort of realization I came to?
Totally agree. Striving for control will spiral you out of control without doubt every single time. Um, yeah, I was trying to control my life. And I think this is another sign to look out for when there's a big life change, like you said. I was a sophomore in high school, and my big life change was that I had just transferred schools. Um, so that's something for parents and friends to watch out for. If somebody's going through a big life change or a traumatic life event, this could be a way that it manifests. But yeah, definitely the control thing. That's another chapter in our book, actually. It's a
Good, good. I got
huge
to read
topic.
this book. I'm sorry that, I mean, this is the first time really getting to talk and stuff, but I'm definitely going to read your book and get some more nuance to it. So I'm going to be doing a follow-up episode, folks, on what I find in the book. And maybe we can do this again and we can talk about it in more detail. But sorry, I haven't done my homework on that.
No, no
But
problem.
with the chapters you have, is there like a step-by-step system? Is this like a progressive method to help people understand and deal with disordered eating patterns?
Not necessarily. We didn't want it to be a technical how-to book. What we do is my co-author Melissa and I go back and forth through these topics. We share stories. It's a mix of a memoir as well as personal practices that can help. But it's not a step-by-step, do these things to overcome your eating disorder, because that kind of triggers the obsessive brain in that way. But at the end, we do have a chapter full of guideposts, we call them, things like what you can journal about, ways to create, ways to get out of your head, breathing exercises. So there are a lot of practical tips, but it is a mix with memoir.
Boy, I could really use that stuff these days myself. Yeah, I think it's very smart of you to do that because, I'm asking about like, what's the step-by-step plan to get out of this mess kind of thing. And I think that's a knee-jerk reaction that we have these days because we've got the internet, we've got all sorts of resources like podcasts, YouTube videos, like here's your 5 steps to lose weight or build muscle or whatever. But one of the things I've learned as a coach over the years is that success is going to happen differently for everybody. Like, I don't know anybody who's ever taken any program that's diet, exercise, or even like I've got friends who've gone through AA and they're like, yeah, they've got the steps, but I kind of did them a little differently and out of this and that and stuff. And nobody has ever achieved success and like, yep, I followed the step-by-step plan. It was A, B, C, and D, and now I'm successful. I've never met anybody that's worked for. It's always been, here's the plan, which is a good template, but I had to figure this part out on my own. I took this from this plan and I did this and I did my own thing here. And it's a creative process rather than, again, that very need for control of like, what exactly do I need to do? And when we really understand how this stuff works, it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I never realized that, but you're totally right that the more you say this is exactly the way you do it, the more that obsessive compulsive need for control takes over. And ironically enough, the less control you actually have over the outcome. Very smart. That's a very interesting way to look about it. I'm glad you did it that way. Thank you for
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm very perfectionistic. It's just part of my personality, and I would love a step-by-step plan. But I know that my audience, the people that are reading this book, don't need that. What they need is tools in their toolbox to help them manage everyday life. Whether that be an eating disorder, general anxiety, any universal struggles.
Oh man, that is such a wise way of looking. See, if I knew that back when I was your age, my life would be a hell of a lot better right now. I'm just learning this now, and I'm like twice your age, so it's better late than never, I guess, kind of thing. But it is a creative process, and creativity always involves some degree of uncertainty. Like people ask me all the time in emails, like, should I do X or Z or Y and stuff? I'm like, usually my answers, which are more accurate, are more of like, well, try both and look for this type of outcome and learn from experience and stuff. And I know that's not what we want. It's like, just give me the answer. Like, how many sets am I supposed to do? Just make it black and white for me. So if we need to lean into this creative space and have more trust for ourselves in order to build our own solutions, is there anything in the book that can help someone learn to have more self-trust and reliance in order to make that happen?
Yeah, Melissa, my co-author, touches a lot on specific practices like questioning techniques, questions to ask yourself. Say you have a thought like, I have too much extra fat on my belly. I have a pooch, what people call a pooch. And there's a series of questions you can ask yourself to build that trust. Like, is this a true thought? Can I absolutely know it's true? How would my life be different if I didn't think this way? So a lot of the things we talk about are just being honest with yourself and taking the time to answer these questions, whether it be in your head or literally on a piece of paper. that can really help with building trust.
Mm. I like that. I like that approach a lot. I was learning yesterday about manipulation tactics. Not that I want to use them, but to be able to spot them and to not be manipulated. Because I've had several professional and other relationships in my life where I look back and I was like, I was totally being manipulated by that.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest lessons I took from what I was learning yesterday was that questions are incredibly powerful for breaking down manipulative frameworks, because those frameworks are usually put up in a way of this is done this way and you do this and this is, it's very black and white. But the second you start asking questions, you break apart the framework and it doesn't have as much power over you. So in that light, would you say that in some ways this disordered eating habits and these type of compulsive habits are almost like a source of self-manipulation, like you're manipulating against your own self?
Yeah, so I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Jenny Schaefer. She's also an author and she writes about eating disorders. Um, Her work is awesome. One of her books is called Life Without Ed. So she goes as far as to name her eating disorder Ed. Um, and I think that's a brilliant technique. It's looking at it as these aren't my own thoughts. It's not me, it's Ed. It's the eating disorder. And that was a huge breakthrough in my recovery, was separating myself from my eating disorder thoughts. But it is definitely a manipulative relationship. Those thoughts will convince you that you can't eat unless you weigh less that day, or you're not allowed to go out with friends because XYZ. So it is totally manipulative.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating thing, because we, especially now, we've got all kinds of emotional manipulative tactics we're becoming aware of through things like social media and internet algorithms, and people are trying to get you to think this way and believe that thing and stuff. But one of the things I've become more aware of is you could be on social media platforms all day long and get exposed to all kinds of manipulative messages, and none of that is nearly as possible as the manipulative and uh, controlling messages you're going to tell yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could be on Facebook all day long that says all kinds of negative things about you, but the second you look in the mirror and be like, oh my gosh, I'm a worthless loser, no one's ever going to love me, that carries way more weight in
Mm-hmm.
your perceptions of yourself than any kind of influential appearances that we have through the media. So
Yeah.
where do some of these messages come from that we are telling ourselves, like, I'm not lovable, I can't have this, I don't have that? Why are we coming up with these negative connotations about ourselves?
Right. And to be clear, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm only 19. I'm just speaking on my experiences. But for me, they came from a place of learned behavior. I had learned at a young age that mistakes were something to be ashamed of, and that if I was hard on myself, that's where I could excel. If I would beat myself up so hard, then I would surpass everybody else. So it was, just a learned thing. Nobody taught me it. It's just how I resonated with things growing up. Um, but an interesting technique that I found helpful with the negative self-talk was mirror affirmations. And my dad actually recommended that I do them. Stand in front of the mirror and say things about yourself that you love. And I thought he was, just stupid old dad. Like, I'm not going to do that. But it was really uncomfortable for me the first few times. I really had a hard time standing in the mirror, looking at myself, and actually thinking that there might be something I like. Um, So it was a total reframing technique. And now I love to do it. It's a lot of fun for me and it comes more naturally over time, but that can be very helpful.
Interesting. I'm thinking to myself about, the learned behavior, and if I abuse myself, that's the way to go forward. And I certainly have exhibited that plenty of times myself. And I've always noticed that in clients and friends who struggle as well, that it's like, oh, I've just got to admonish myself and beat myself up. And that's going to motivate me to succeed. And I've never known it to work to any
Mhm.
degree. But I've always noticed that the folks who do achieve more success in almost anything in life, they're doing it from a place of positiveness, love. As I always say, you can't produce a positive result when you're coming from a negative place. Because
Exactly.
someone
I
who's
love
like,
that.
oh, I'm so weak and out of shape and fat and stuff, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to punish myself. These people never really get very far. But the individuals I know, myself included, is like, dude, I love a good workout, like just getting a good muscle pump in. And, it's very cathartic to go for a bike ride. It feels so good. That produces results in spades. And even if these two individuals on paper are physically doing the same thing, the one coming from a positive place is excelling at much faster rate of speed. And is there kind of a negative connotation, do you think, in society for such self-love? Because I've noticed if I'm showing respect and things to myself, people look at me as being kind of like full of myself and
Yeah,
arrogant, cocky and things. And it's like, no, I'm just appreciating what I've got. I'm loving me. Do you think there's a negativity about that?
absolutely. I think we as a society label positive self-talk as narcissistic and things like that. And I also think a lot of it is rooted in what I call hustle culture. I don't know where I learned that term, but it's pretty well known. Hustle culture pushes us to be negative self-talkers. Um, and if we're enjoying life and enjoying what we can do, that's not hustling, that's not going to propel us forward. So I think that's an aspect of it.
Yeah. Boy, I can relate to that big time. I've fallen more into that these days because I'm working on releasing a new program and I'm just working my tail off. I'm not
Yeah.
taking time for myself. I'm not having fun. And I'm noticing I'm falling into those negative thought patterns of, I've got to work twice as hard for half the results. I'm not a very good person at this. I can't do this very well. So I've got to work my ass off. I can't afford to have this fun or enjoy myself. And I'm noticing I'm relapsing into that self talk. It's not about eating disorder, but it's about working too much, the
Yeah.
hustle culture, as they say. And
I do that I
yeah.
do that with school a lot too. Like, I'm a very focused student, but I've got a million other things. Like I've got this book we just released and um I find myself trying to multitask to keep up. And in the end, that just drains me even more, and I have less energy to actually get things done.
Mhm.
So what I do is I compartmentalize each task. Um, this is book time. I am doing nothing else. Or this is my time to go to the gym. I am doing nothing else. Um, and that's been really helped me be at ease, I guess.
I like that. So, what we're starting to explore here is this idea that these behavior traits, and let's be real, they're just habits. They're
Mhm.
habits about how we see ourselves and how we see the world and how we relate to it. These habits are extending beyond just how we relate to our body and how we're feeding it. They can relate to so many other things. So, is this something that if someone's like, okay, I was very, eating disorders and everything, but I got past it. Have you noticed if people just transfer those types of dysfunctional patterns just to other areas of their life?
Yes, all the time. I see it in myself all the time. And when I quote, graduated therapy, and graduated from my dietitian, I was considering myself recovered from my eating disorder, and I still do, but I was easily obsessing over anything else. Like, what's my next thing I can grab onto? And a really interesting image that my therapist gave me was that the eating disorder was like a log in a fast flowing stream. So I was flowing down this stream, river of anxiety, if you will, and I found this log, and it was an eating disorder. And it saved me. It was something to grab onto, something to give me control. Um, but I had to, let go of the log. And it was scary because that was the very thing that saved me from drowning. So I'll find myself trying to grab onto different logs, whether that be, you know, obsessing over weightlifting. I got into that for a little bit and I saw it getting too obsessive. Maybe it's like going out. People will turn to drinking. A lot of eating disorder patients are also alcoholics. So yeah, it's something to constantly keep in check.
Wow. It just is, I'm getting so much out of this myself, just expanding on things. Cause, we typically think of, one of the biggest lessons I learned in my actual studies of eating disorders in college was we think of it as a very dysfunctional approach, like, okay, anorexia, bulimia kind of thing. And I'm like, well, I don't have that stuff. I don't need to worry about it kind of thing. And then they were like, well, these are the traits of disordered eating habits kind of thing. And I'm sitting there in class and I'm like, I've got every single one of those traits. Like, but I eat healthy. I'm good. Yeah, sure. I'll ruin my day if I eat 3 French fries, but that just means I'm more disciplined about my eating. And so I think it's one of the biggest takeaways I'm getting from this is that these are behavior patterns that we all want to be aware of because they can drag us down so much in other areas of life. And even if we're not perceiving ourselves as fitting this one stereotypical mold of, the eating disordered individual or the person who is work obsessive, a workaholic or whatever, that these traits can still exist for us and they can still be very detrimental if we don't address them.
Mm-hmm. These are universal topics, and that's why we're so passionate about it. And we want to get this book and our message out to a broader audience. So it's really exciting because I think everybody can resonate with a lot of these topics.
Yeah. And I love the title of your book too, Full, because I've long been preaching an approach to healthy eating that I call eating to satisfy, where the purpose of a healthy diet is to satisfy your appetites, is to give you what you need in order to be at your best, mentally, physically, emotionally, and so on. And so the idea of your topic here of just full, it's kind of along the same lines.
Yeah, that was props to Melissa, my co-author. She came up with full, and I was like, yes, that is exactly what this is. We speak about our eating disorders as times in our life where we were standing on the sidelines of life. We were halfway living, or in some cases, we were dying. So I just love the title. I think it speaks
I want to
words.
follow up with what you just said, like standing on the sidelines, because I've noticed that a lot too, where people will have this, I need to control, my food, my diet, my weight, whatever it is. And once I have control, which usually means crossing the finish line of some sort of goal, like once I get to this weight, or once I've done this or whatever, then I can start to live. Then I can give myself permission to be happy. Then I can give myself permission to go out and enjoy life and everything like that. And it's always a finish line on the horizon. You never get there because even if you do get that scale to read that number, then you've got to, well, okay, once I can maintain this, or okay, now once I've got that weight plus abs, and it's always ongoing. So is there also a little bit of a nervousness or a fear about just not allowing ourselves to fully embrace and live life on our own terms. And we're just saying, I'll
Yeah.
put it off until this sort of thing happens. And it never happens. So I don't need to worry about actually embracing my true potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we one of the chapters in our book is called Fear of Growing Up. And I think this is kind of what you're touching on. Um, it can also be translated as like fear of developing, fear of moving on. So for me, I was young and I was 16 when I developed anorexia. And I was so afraid of growing up and I didn't even know it. Um, so I literally just put my life on hold subconsciously to avoid all the responsibilities that I would have to face if I was living a full life. You know, I thought if I was sick enough, then I wouldn't have to get my driver's license. I would have to be taken care of, and I'm okay with that. You know, I won't have to go to college if I'm too sick. Um, so it's a really interesting in that way. There's a fear of developing.
Hmm. And then, of course, it's just not just for kids or young adults
Mhm.
growing up. There are people who, a lot of times, when they tell me they want to lose weight, they want to change, they want to build muscle, because fitness ultimately is about a self-development program. But then they seem to be holding on to that proverbial log so much, where they say,
Yes.
like, I need to stay this kind of person, and I need to stay with this type of life in order to still be happy, safe, and secure. But the results they want won't come from that place. They have to transform. And that's why I'll tell people it's kind of morbid to look at this way, but I'll sometimes tell folks who are struggling with this, I'm like, look, change is terminal.
Mhm.
Is part of you is going to die in this big transformation. And by the time you reach the end, you're going to be happy that that part of you is no longer with you, because
Mm.
it's been holding you back. It's been an anchor and you didn't realize it up until then. But I've never known people to go through any sort of major results in life, whether it's losing weight, making more money, finally having healthy relationships, whatever. And they're like, yeah, I'm a very different person than I was back then. So do you find that people are also afraid to have this personal transformation and change within themselves? They're holding on to themselves as they perceived in their past?
Yeah, I think it's more of like they can't even imagine a transformed version of themselves. I could not imagine myself going to college. I that person didn't even exist. Um, so when people would tell me like, "Come on, like let's get you recovered so you can be healthy to go to college and do all these fun things." I'm like, "I don't even that's not even me. I don't even know what kind of person you're talking about." Um, so I had to work a lot on imagining what my life could be like. And not just imagining, but seeing little glimpses here and there in my real life. Like, if I would challenge a certain fear food, like if I would go out to ice cream with my friends, I would experience laughter and a good memory. And I was like, oh, right, this is what I could be experiencing every day. Um, so I think there is it's may not be so much of a fear just to not even realizing that that can exist.
Yeah. Do you use any like visualization techniques in your book?
Um, I'm trying to think. Maybe not directly, um, but that would be a great thing to touch on. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I love visualization.
It's funny, you need to see something sometimes or get exposed to something just to get an understanding of what you're going towards.
Mhm.
Because I know for me, I've gone through a lot of personal changes and transformation, many different ways in my life. And even though I would think to myself, okay, I want to be better at this or do this and that, I wasn't able to really understand what that was going to be like until I was
Mhm.
around other people who had that,
Yeah.
or read stories or whatever. I needed to expose myself to that type of result, because even though I had it in my head, I was, of course, imagining it from the limited perspective I had from my past. But in order to go to the future, I needed someone else to come into my life and be like, this is what it's like. And it's awesome. And I was like, wow, I didn't even realize. And
Mhm.
what would you say about if someone's battling with disordered eating right now, and they're like, I don't know where to go. And of course, the internet's not always going to be our best friend. What would you say is probably a good place to start, other than just reading your book, of course? Because I'm
Yeah.
recommending that right now. I mean, obviously, go read her book. I put a link down below in this description. I haven't even read it yet, but I can already tell it's going to be money. And even if you get one takeaway, you just need one lesson to change your life. It's probably going to come from this book. So definitely go and pick up a copy. But aside from that, if someone is feeling really stuck, what other resources can they look to?
Mhm. Um, I always say get professional help, and I know that's not always accessible for people, unfortunately. Um, but getting a therapist, a psychiatrist, a dietitian, I had all three, and I would not have recovered without them. But if that's not accessible, finding a way to reach out to friends. Eating disorders are so very isolating, and it will keep you locked away, and it will keep you looking at your phone and seeing distorted images online, and that can become your reality. It did for me. So when I got the courage to reconnect with old friends, I saw their lives and I saw that they were fully living, and it inspired me. I was like, oh shit, excuse my language, but like this is reality, not the things I've been seeing online.
Hmm.
So yeah,
That's a good
reach
way to
out to
go about it.
people.
And I
Yeah.
think this stuff is more prevalent than we think it is. Because as we were talking about before, we've got these perceptions of what someone with an eating disorder looks like and feels like and how they behave. But these types of disorders extend beyond food and body images. They
Mhm.
extend to work and they extend to other types of activities. But I think if we approach this stuff and understand, okay, I'm going to talk to my friends about this, I think we're going to find that a lot of our closest friends and relatives, they can relate. It's like, do you ever feel like, if you do this, you feel really kind of guilty about it, even though you should do it because it's a good thing for you? They're like, oh, yeah, that happens to me all the time. And like you were saying before, it's the isolation that is most damaging than anything else. And if we can get connection with other people around these sorts of things, that can be a huge valuable asset in getting out of this stuff.
Connection is always the antidote.
I love it.
Um,
I love it. Because
Pretty
haven't they
much of any
done
struggle, I
some
think.
research to find that people who live more isolated lives, like supposedly that's just as bad for your overall health and longevity as like abusing alcohol and like cigarette smoking and
Wow.
things?
I believe it. I convinced myself that I was an introvert, and I am. At my core, I am an introverted person. I get my energy from alone time. But in my eating disorder, I convinced myself that I was so introverted that I didn't need people. But everybody needs connection. It is so vital.
For sure. Oh, 100%. And the more introverted you are, I think the more you drink heavily from human interaction too. I've got
Yeah.
extrovert individuals in my life, and they can go to a party and talk with 100 people and be totally carefree. But at the end of the party, you're like, so who'd you meet? And you're like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I just talked to a lot of people. But us introverts, if you talk to two people, it's like, oh, I met this one guy named Jim. He's so cool. Like, let me tell you all about him. So I think we really drink heavily from the limited interactions that we have.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like that.
Yeah. So it's all a personality thing. And it comes again down to understanding these things about ourselves in order to make progress in our own way, at our own speed, at our own pace. Folks, again, pick up her book. You do you have socials and stuff? Anybody can reach out to you? Do you have contacts?
Yes, I'm on Instagram at alayna.burke. We also have a website. It's blackumbrellawellness.com. And you can purchase the book through there and also find a free PDF breathwork guide, as well as some other resources. So it's a great place to go.
Fantastic. Links to all this stuff is down below, folks. Alayna, thank you so much for your time. It's sincerely appreciated. I've learned a lot from it. Got me a lot to think about over the next week or so. And everybody, if you have further questions, reach out to her or me directly as always. But thanks very much for listening. And this has been another bonus episode of the Red Delta Project podcast. I'll talk to you folks next time. Till then, be fit and live free.